Rolling.
We're going to be discussing tonight the recent collapse of the Greek economy based on Bible, Talmud, Midrashim, Kabbalah, Hasidut, right up to this very day. The verse in Ezekiel 38:18 reads, "V'haya bayom ahu bo Gog al admat Yisrael." The prophet Ezekiel describes a nation, perhaps a mythic nation, called Gog, in English G-O-G. One of our great Hasidic teachers of the 19th century was Rabbi Gershom Hanoch Henach of Radzin, or Ishbitza, Poland. And commenting on this verse, "V'haya b'yom ahu b'yom bo Gog al admat Yisrael," the Radziner Rebbe writes the following: "Ita b'Gemara, Megillah Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph," it says in the Talmud, the end of tractate Megillah, Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav Huna is explaining which Haftarah we should read on the Shabbat Chol HaMoed Sukkot. We Jews, every Sabbath, which is Saturday, read a portion from the prophets, known as the Haftarah. After the reading from the Torah itself, which is the Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses, we supplement that with a Haftarah, a reading from the prophet. And there is some discussion in the Talmud what we should be reading on the Sabbath of the intermediate day of Sukkot. We know that in October we have one of the 3 major festivals, Sukkot, and there are the middle days of the holiday called Chol HaMoed. It's a semi-festival, and it's also referred to as the intermediate days in English, Chol HaMoed. So the question is, that Sabbath of the intermediate days of Sukkot, what portion from the prophet should we be reading? And the answer is given, Uvesukot b'yom bo Gog. The Talmud answers, you know what we should be reading? We should be reading this chapter in Ezekiel 38, which describes a future apocalyptic event, the coming of Gog. And later we'll discuss the identity of this nation, Gog. For now it's an unknown. And continues the Rebbe, V'ita b'midrash, it's written in the Midrash, Gemire shemapalato shel Gog yeh b'Sukkot. The reason that we've selected this reading for the festival of Sukkot is Gemire. We have a tradition. We have an oral tradition that goes all the way back, a very ancient tradition, Shemapalato shel Gog yeh b'Sukkot, that the downfall of Gog will take place on Sukkot. So that's why we're reading about the downfall of Sukkot at that time of year. V'hinei hari kadosh, the holy lion. When we say in Kabbalah the holy lion, we're referring to a man by the name of Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, who lived in Sfat in the Upper Galilee in the 1500s. And he was the greatest Kabbalist of all time. And he's referred to as the Holy Lion, Hari HaKadosh. V'nei Hari HaKadosh Zal מבאר זה שאמרו ז"ל בגמרא, רבותינו התיר לכתוב יוונית, משום שאין שום אומה קרובה כל כך אל הקדושה. Earlier, in the Talmud, we discover something very interesting. This is in that same tractate Megillah. In the Mishnah 8b, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says that we are allowed to write the Bible in Greek. The Bible was originally written in Hebrew, and we are permitted to write it in Greek. Now the question arises, what is so special about Greek? Why should Greece receive favorite nation status? We're not allowed to write it in English or in Latin. Why are we allowed to write it in Greek? And the Holy Lion, Ari HaKadosh, says, because there is no people so close, in such proximity to Kedusha, to the source of holiness, as Greece. V'nikreid klipat noga. Now, I have to explain some Kabbalistic terminology. The way a Kabbalist views the reality, it's divided into three regions. There's a region of Kedusha, of holiness. At the opposite extreme, there's a region of Klipa, which literally means a husk or a shell that's on the side of unholiness. And then there's the midpoint, which is referred to as Klipat Noga. So on the one hand, it's Klipa, it's dark, it's opaque, it represents the side of darkness. But on the other hand, it's what's called Noga, meaning it's translucent. So it has potential for Kedusha. It can go either way. It's sort of neutral. It's Prophetic. You know, it's neither here nor there. And it depends what is done with it. It can be uplifted to Kedusha, or it can be downgraded to Gimel Klipot Meo, to absolute darkness. Kirichtiv v'noga lo saviv. This is, again, in the book of Yechezkel, Ezekiel. In the beginning, you have the Maseh Merkavah, the work of the chariot, this vision that Ezekiel the prophet saw. And he talks about v'noga lo saviv, and that's the source of this term noga. V'zehu klipat Gog. And this is the peculiar situation of this mythic people, Gog, that they're caught in between. They can go either way. They can go towards Kedusha, or they can go towards Klipa, towards holiness or unholiness. And this is how the Ari understands the fact that we are allowed to transcribe the Torah into Greek, because there's no nation so close to Kedusha, coming into very close proximity as Greece. And then trails off the Radzina Rebbe, Shekol habirur kenegda hurak biyado yitbarach. The clarification, the ultimate clarification of this Klipat Noga, of Gog, of Greece, is in the hand of God. It's something beyond human beings. It's something that's ultimately left to God. That's what the Sod Yesharim, the Radzina Rebbe, writes for Sukkot. Now let's go back to that chapter in Ezekiel 38, which I mentioned, because we're still in sort of a dilemma. We don't know who Gog are. And one of the all-time great commentators on the Navi, on the prophet, is the Malbim, who lived in Russia the end. He passed away in 1879. And this is what he writes on Ezekiel 38:2. V'gog lo yad'anu ata mihem. We don't know today who Gog are. The prophet alludes to a nation Gog, but who are Gog? We do not know today. Rak kefi hamevoar shehu nasi Meshech v'Tuval. But based on what's written in the verse, in the following verse, Ezekiel 38:3, where it calls Gog Nasi Rosh Meshech v'Tuval, that Gog is the prince of Meshech and Tuval, says the Malbim, Hem mibnei Yefet. These are sons or descendants of Yefet. So we have it on the authority of the Malbim, and this is really Pishat HaPashut. This is the simple reading of the verse. Nasi Rosh Meshech v'Tuval, that Gog, whoever Gog is descended from Yefet. So again, we are pointing in the direction that Gog is Greece. And the Mapala, the downfall of Greece, according to our tradition, would take place on Sukkot, which is in the month of October. And that's when the Greek economy collapsed. Now, all of this needs an update, all right? The collapse of a people need not be physical. It can be monetary. It can be financial. We have a saying, Ani hashuv kemet, that when someone loses all of their money, they're reduced to poverty, it's as if they're dead. Metu kol anashim makshim nafshecha, in the time of Aviram and Shemot, these enemies of Moses are referred to as having died, but they didn't die literally. They lost their wealth. And ani hashuv kamet, when you're without financial resources, you're finished. It's as if you're dead. So it's possible that the prophecy took the place of a financial collapse as opposed to a physical annihilation of the people. And then there's something else that we have to address, and that is there's a danger implicit in calculating the end, the apocalypse. And the rabbis in Tractate Sanhedrin, in the Perek Chelek, in the chapter Chelek, say, Tipach rucham shemachashvei kitzim. Blasted be those who would calculate the end. On the other hand, there is a Ramban and the Nachmanides who says it's not that simple. And something that we learn from our great Hasidic masters, and that is that all of the kitzim, even when they're wrong, they're right. For example, the great Menachem Mendel of Lubavitch, the Tzemach Tzedek, he authored a book of response to Tzemach Tzedek. Menachem Mendel Schneerson, he was living in Lubavitch in Russia, and people had their eyes on the year 1848, Tav Reish Chet. They thought Mashiach, that the end will be in 1848. And it didn't happen. And they said to the Rebbe, what happened? And he answered, isn't it enough for you that in this year there was published my grandfather's Sefer, the Likutei Torah, from the Alter Rebbe, of Shneer Zalman, of Liozna, Liadi. In other words, it took a different form. It morphed into something else. It was a year. of the Messiah. But the Messianism took a different form. Although if you're a student of European history, you know that there were revolutions throughout Europe in 1848. But it didn't take the form that people anticipated. It morphed into something else. So he said that in a sense, Mashiach did come. There was a Rosh Mashiach, there was a light of Mashiach that manifested in these revelations of Hasidut, of Likutei Torah. So when it comes to the downfall of Gog, which we're being told is Greece, it did take place during Sukkot. That part was true. And there was a Mapala, it was a downfall. But it didn't take the form that people had expected all these thousands of years. It took a different form. Ani Chashuv Kamet, the financial and economic collapse of Greece.